Hey there, welcome to the channel. I'm Jana with Purl Together, and today it's cast on day for the After the Rain sweater knit along. The pattern After the Rain is by Heidi Kirrmaier. Fantastic sweater, especially if it's your first one. It's very well written. Link to the patterns down below in the video description, as are all the links. So today's cast on day. Now you should have already completed your swatch. Swatching is super important, so I'm going to put a video down below in the video description, but also right up here in the right-hand corner. So you need to go watch the swatching video first if you haven't already. Really important if you want your sweater to fit either you or your intended person. Go watch the swatching video. Do your swatch if you haven't. It's part of the process. So that's how come instead of starting cast on day on the 17th, we started our knit along with swatching because it is a very important first step that should not be overlooked. Okay, go do that. If you've already done that and you're ready to begin your cast on, fantastic. I'm going to walk you through the first section of the pattern. We're going to do that together. And, you know, a lot of you might finish that in a day or a couple of evenings, and that's okay. So we're taking this pretty slow. We're just going to do a section each week. The schedule for the knit along is pinned at the top of the Facebook group, as well as the Purl Together Ravelry group. The schedule of when you can expect which section of the videos to be released. So go check that out if you're wondering. So before we get started with that, I want to give a big hearty thank you to a new patron. So Kathy joins us from Kearney, Nebraska. She joined the Purl Together patron family over at patreon.com/Purl Together. So she pledged a small monthly amount and she gets to be in the Facebook group and ask me questions. And, you know, we have a lot of fun over there and we have patron knit night and so forth. So if you're interested, head over there and check that out. But when Kathy joined, she asked me a question and you can send me messages and I always respond to patrons first. And so that's one of the perks. And she wanted to know what inspired me to start this channel. And so I thought I would take a moment to answer that. So I live in the middle of nowhere, Southeast Wyoming. We don't have a local yarn store. We don't have much of anything. I'm quite a ways from town, live on a farm. If you're interested in watching what goes on the farm, I might start putting a little more of that on Instagram as well. Anyway, so I live on a farm. We have dairy goats and a couple of ducks and a big garden, but I don't have a local yarn store anywhere near me. And one of the ones in a neighboring town, closed last year. So, I mean, I don't think it was COVID related. I think they just retired. But cool. I hope that's all it was. Anyway, I don't have anything like that. And I wanted to kind of build that community. And so I started kind of doing a knit along thing where we would knit together in the Facebook group. And I had started the channel because I just wanted that community and I wanted to knit things with people, with like-minded people. And I said to my kids and my husband one time, if I could just somehow, you know, arrange my life so all I have to do is, if I could somehow arrange my life so I could watch Netflix and knit and get paid for it, how would that be? How awesome would that be? So Purl Together was born out of my desire to watch Netflix and knit stuff and hang out with knitters and build that community. So hopefully I'm on my way to doing that. And so I'm really glad that you're here and I appreciate you watching. And if you'd like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com. Nonetheless, here we go on another knit along. So what follows is the cast on. But before you actually start that cast on, I want you to read through the pattern and kind of get a general sense of the designer's style of writing patterns. And I want you to take a little, pen and circle your sizes. And the way that Heidi has written the pattern, and we said this in the interview that I did, the podcast interview that I did with her, the way that she has designed the pattern is you'll have a chart and all of your specific numbers are right there. So highlight that column that pertains to you. Just read through it, kind of get an overview of the construction and how it's going to go, and then do your cast on. Okay, highlighting your numbers. And know that there's going to be a lot of hand-holding. If you have questions at all, you can post in the Purl Together Facebook or Ravelry group, and there are centuries of experience in these groups. And if I'm not you know, if I'm not sitting in front of my computer, there's lots of other people that are more than willing to help, including our moderators who I have tagged in a post at the top of those various groups because I'm headed out on vacation. I planned this trip long before we decided to do this knit along. So please know that I will check in when I can. But I'm going to be largely out of cell service for much of my trip. So I will check in when I can. But the moderators are more than competent to help answer these basic questions. This is a really straightforward pattern. Okay, we're casting on with the long tail cast on. If you haven't done that before, I do have a separate, more detailed and slower video that I'll put in the description down below. You can watch that video first and then cast on the number of stitches that you need according to your size, and you'll see that on the chart. All right, let's get started. Okay, this is the sweater that I already have in progress for my daughter, and I'm just showing you this is to illustrate that you're starting out with color B, and we're knitting this part back and forth. Then we're going to join everything up for the neckline. Now, obviously, I haven't picked up yet for the neckline for the collar. That will come later because I'm still working on the sleeves on this one, but I just wanted to illustrate the reason that we're beginning knitting back and forth to start with, and then we'll join everything together, and that's what creates the neck shaping. Okay, so here we go. I'm casting on 72 stitches for my size. I'm knitting the 2X. You'll follow the chart on page 4 and determine what cast on number that you need. So if you're not familiar with the long tail cast on, I do have a video for that, which I'll link here in the upper right hand corner of the video and also down below in the description. So I do mine with 2 hands. I don't do the one-handed long tail cast on. I just never learned that way. So if it looks funny to you, that's why. Most people do it with one hand, but that's okay. So do what works best for you. My sweater is going to be a different striping sequence than the pattern because that's just what I've chosen to do for mine. But I will also periodically be referring to the sweater that I'm knitting for my daughter, which does have the 6-row stripes as indicated in the pattern. So I'm doing one of both ways. So if you're following along exactly as the pattern, you'll cast on with color B, and then you'll do 6 rows of each, of each stripe. So I'll be referring to this one quite a lot as we go along. All right, so my colors are this lovely dark gray, rich tonal, and then a colorway from Lauren at A Girl in Her Wool called Before the Rain, not to be confused with the name of the pattern, which is After the Rain. But that's appropriate. Before the Rain and my dark gray are my 2 colors. So I'm just going to cast on with my blue, lovely blue tonal, and the appropriate size, the appropriate number of cast on stitches, and then we're going to begin on the wrong side, not our setup. All right, I'm starting off with my long tail cast on, and I have 2 yarns here in a slip knot, tied in a slip knot together, which does not count as part of my cast on. And the reason I do this, I'll link to a more detailed video about this in the description, but the reason I do this is because I start from both ends of my cake, so I have the inner one coming out, and then I have the outer one as well. And the reason I do that is because I don't like to fuss with, how do I know how much tail I need for the long tail cast on? So if you just take the inside and outside of your cake, tie them together in a slip knot, and then just start your cast on, you won't have to worry about using too little or too much and having a bunch of tail left over, especially if it's rather lovely and precious hand-dyed yarn. So I'm just going to cast on my required number that I obtained from the chart on page 4 of your pattern, and then we'll carry on starting on the wrong side row. So you may want to gather some markers. You'll need 4, I believe. Just get yourself a little handful and some snacks. We're going to be here for a little bit. Okay, I have my cast on here, and I'm going to double check. I always double and triple count my cast on because it is not something you want to have to tear out and do over. So if you're doing the cast on method that if you're starting out like I did, where you have this double slip knot in the beginning because you pulled from both the inside and the outside of your yarn cake, you do not count that because we're going to take that out. So now that I have my correct number of my cast on, I'm going to choose which yarn I want to start knitting with. I prefer to knit with the one that comes off the outside of the cake, so I'll cut the other one. I just give it a 4 or 5 inch tail so that I have enough to weave in later. And then I have this to begin knitting with, and this comes from the outside of my cake. So you do whatever you prefer about that. Okay, let me just take a moment to explain the idea here. When you look at row number 1, you're on the wrong side, and this is our setup. So we're going to purl a certain number of stitches, place a marker. We're going to purl some more. That will be the back, and we're basically going to divide these sections into 4, so that we have the front stitches, the back stitches, and then the front stitches again, which is the raglan. So let me show you on this other one that I've already started what that's going to look like, just so that you kind of have a cursory understanding from the beginning. So we're starting on this back side, and this was opened up, you'd be able to see this is where it starts. So the raglan simply means you have this front section here, and then you have this raglan line. This is where we do the increases. And then you have this top of the sleeve or the shoulder stitches. This is the sleeve stitches. And then you have the ones that go all the way across the back. And then the same thing on the other side. So you have your raglan seam, your sleeve stitches, and then the other side on the front. So I hope that helps you understand the chart a little bit on page 4. So you have front stitches. There'll be 2 fronts, and then your sleeve stitches in the back. So that's why we're going to place markers so that we know where to do those raglan increases. So pick out some markers that you like. I take great joy in choosing markers for our projects. Sometimes I like them to match. Sometimes I don't care if they match. Okay, so I purled 2, placed a marker. Now I'm purling across the sleeve stitches, and then I'm going to place another marker, and so forth across row 1. As always, be sure to holler if you have any questions in the Facebook group or the Ravelry group, or leave a comment down below. All of the links to the groups are in the video description. Okay, so 2, 4, 6. I need a few more before I do another marker. So I'm just going to work my way across row 1 in this way. Okay, when we get to the end of our first row, you might look at this and go, uh-oh, I have 4 stitches. That's too many. But remember, we have that double slip knot that we're going to get rid of now. So really, I do only have 2 stitches left. So that is correct. And then I'm just going to drop that slip knot and leave it. So I will, pull on this and make sure my tension is good when I go back and start the right side row. But go ahead and take that slip knot out that we started our long tail cast on with. Okay, now is the time when you need to double check all your sections between the markers and make sure that your stitch counts are correct, because if you're off right now, it will cause a problem later. So just take a minute and, ounce of prevention and all that. Now on row 2, we're actually going to begin make 1 right and make 1 left. I do have a video about this also, but I'll show you here. I'll also link that video down below if you want it to be a little bit slower. So when we make 1 right, we're going to go in with our left needle tip. See how there's that light colored bar between those 2 stitches? We're going to go in from the back like that and lift up that bar. Now you know that this is a make 1 right because the strand that's on your needle is leaning to the right. So that's as opposed to a make 1 left, which I'll show you here in a moment. What we want to do though is knit into the front of this stitch, which is a little bit awkward. Knit into the front of the stitch because that will twist it. And then you want to have a hole. So that's a make 1 right, which is an increase that leans to the right. Okay, then we're going to knit 1, slip the marker. Now we're going to make 1 left after we knit 1. You're just going to knit 1 on each side of the marker before you do your increase. When we make 1 left, we go in from the front. And now you can tell that's correct because your strand that you picked up is leaning to the left. And this one we're going to knit into the back of. Now, try not to split the stitch. If you have a little problem, getting into the back of that stitch, you can always kind of do this little rolling maneuver, and then you're in the back. Okay, I'll show you that again. So if this is a little tight, go in from the front like you're going to purl, and then take your needle tips and kind of roll them around each other, so then your right hand needle's now in the back. Knit into the back of that, and it causes the stitch to twist. Being careful not to split the stitch. And then you want to have a hole. Okay, now you're going to knit to the next marker. Or actually knit to 1 stitch before the marker, and we're going to do the same thing. So the way that you can remember this is when you do your increases, you're going to have them leaning away from the markers, okay? So the next marker that we come to, 1 stitch before, I went a little too far because I was talking. 1 stitch before, we want it to, our increase to lean away from the marker. So we're going to want it to lean to the right. So we're going to go in from the back. one way you can remember that is, we'll be right back. You can also, if you can't remember that little phrase, you also know that your strand will be slanted to the right when you look at it to the front of the needle. We're going to knit into the front of that. Okay, then knit one, slip the marker, knit one, make one left. So we're going into the front where the strand is, go into the front. The strand leans to the left, so you know you're correct, and knit into the back of that. Okay, and then carry on, knitting to one stitch before the next marker. We're going to do that all the way to the end. Okay, I'll show you that one more time. You're definitely going to get used to it by the time we get all the way through the yoke and the raglan increases. You will absolutely have this nailed down. Here I am one stitch before the marker, and I want my increase to lean away from the marker, so I want to increase to the right. So I'll be right back. So you come in with your left needle into the back of that strand, this bar between the stitches, and now the strand that's on my needle is leaning to the right, so I know that that's correct. And I'm going to knit into the front of that to twist it on. Okay, knit one. Now, if you have this problem, which sometimes you do with markers with a bead, it's helpful when you're knitting to have the bead on the opposite side of where your yarn is coming off of, so that you don't trap the bead in your work. Knit one, and we're going to do it, make one left, so we come in from the front. The strand is now leaning to the left, and I knit into the back of it to twist it. All right. We have one more set of increases to do. Now, every time we do that across, we're increasing 8 stitches. So if you want to double check, you could take your original cast on number now and see if you come out to be 8 more. Sometimes if you find that your stitch count is wrong, maybe you missed a raglan increase at one of the markers. So it's just something to troubleshoot, to look for if you have something that's wrong. Okay, so again, we're going to come in from the back. So we want a right leaner away from the marker, come in from the back. Now I do that little rolly thing almost automatically, because sometimes this is really hard to knit into depending on the tension of your knitting. You can go into the back, roll the tips around each other, and then I pull that forward a little, pinch it with my left index finger, and I've made some slack to knit into. So if your yarn is a little tight, you can certainly do that technique. Okay, now I'm going to make one that leans to the left, and you can do that rolly thing here as well. All right, knit it into the back of that, knit one, and I'm finished with my second row. Now, generally, you do an increase row, and then you do a plain row. So, and that's certainly the case here. So row 3 is just purl your way back. Okay, now for rows 4 and 5, we're just going to do the exact same thing as we did for rows 2 and 3. So just repeat those 2 rows, making your increases just the way I showed you. And then we'll see what's next after that. Now, did you notice what I did there without even really thinking about it? I picked up that strand from the back, and then I widened it out a little, did the rolling thing to get my right hand needle in the front, you know, rolling the tips around each other. And then I pinch it with my left index finger and move around so I can knit into the front of that. That's just my little method of loosening things up if you find that, you know, your yarn's a little tight on your needle. So I'm just doing my increases, leaning away from the marker. I'm going to increase another 8 stitches, 2 around each side of the marker, and purl my way back. So that's row 4 and 5. We're just repeating what we did on 2 and 3. Okay, if you are changing colors every 6 rows, as shown in the pattern, now is when you'll want to do that, because this is 6 rows, not counting the cast on, which is that first little bit there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have 5 rows on here. Beginning row 6, you'll want to change colors if that's what you're doing. I am not changing colors right now, but I will for the sake of showing you, and then I'll take it back out. So don't be alarmed if you don't see this alternative color in this particular place later on. I'm just going to begin knitting to show, for the sake of showing you, and then I'm going to take it out and do my own thing. But if I'm going to change colors, I just hold the tail in my left hand and I just literally start knitting with it. You're going to fix the tension on these tails when we join in the round and when you weave in your ends. So if you're doing this, like the pattern, you're going to knit 2, do your increase right here because it says to. This is the one exception of knitting to 1 stitch before the marker, is the pattern wants you to make your increase here, then knit to the marker and carry on. So you're just going to knit it exactly the way it's indicated in the pattern, doing the increases, and you can see that that's really going to loosen up. It's okay. Just tighten up those tails. We'll adjust the tension as we carry the yarn up, which I will also show you when I do my color change. Carrying the colors up on the inside of your work is simply just what it sounds like. We're going to adjust the tail tension, and when we come back with this color, we're going to carry this tail up to the next place we need it. So go ahead and do the next couple of rows exactly as the instructions tell you, and you're going to keep doing these raglan increases for quite a while. As I mentioned a moment ago, I am not changing colors right here, but I will point out that we are doing a make 1 left right here in the beginning. We're going to do a knit 2 and do a make 1 left. So just be mindful of watching the pattern instructions and not assuming what's going on. So we're going to do a make 1 left, then knit to 1 stitch before the marker. So we're having a little bit of an extra increase right here at the front. Then we'll go ahead with our make 1 right, and do the other make 1 left on the other side of the marker. Okay, now if you're changing colors here, go ahead and do that. And we're going to just repeat these last 2 rows several more times, changing colors every 6 rows as indicated in the pattern, or if you're doing an alternative striping sequence, you can work that out for yourself when you want to change your colors. Like if you're doing more bold stripes, or maybe you're not doing stripes at all. Maybe you're knitting a solid color. Also take note that at the end of this row we have an extra increase on the other end as well, 2 stitches before the end, where we're going to do a make 1 to the right. So actually in that row and subsequent rows, we're going to be increasing 10 stitches, I believe, with each increase row or round. So you can already begin to see the raglan lines here, which is awesome. So you can see that one there, and you can see that leaning off that way. So cool. We're going to repeat these last 2 rounds 4 more times. So I would keep track on a Post-it note or keep track in Knit Companion or whatever, whatever works best for you, but you're going to want to keep track. Alternatively, since you know, you can figure out your stitch counts if you want as well. If you know you're increasing 4 more times and you're doing 10 increases at a time, you can add that to your stitch count and see. Also, she does provide a chart of stitch counts after this particular section down below. So that's what I do. I just go with it, go forward with it until I get to the place where I want to check, where it matches up with her chart. But if you want the assurance that you're getting your stitch count each time, you could certainly do that by just knowing, you know, on rows 2 and 3, you're increasing by 8. And then you're doing that a second time with rows 4 and 5. So that's an increase of 16 stitches for that little portion. And then you're increasing 10 stitches at a time with row 6 and 7. And you're doing that a total of 5 times. So you can figure that out and make yourself a little chart if you wanted. Okay, this next row is going to be the same as we have been doing on the right-hand side with all of the increasing of the extra 10 stitches. But when we get to the wrong side, you'll notice that instead of purling all the way back, we have a make 1 on the purl side. We're going to go ahead and purl the first 2 stitches, and then the pattern asks us to do a make 1 right purl. So You'll notice all the explanations and the abbreviations are on page 8. So I'm just going to do a visual demonstration for those of you that prefer that. So to make one right purl, we're with the right hand needle, we're going to lift the bar here and put it on the left hand needle so that the left leg of the stitch is in the front, like that. Okay, so the left leg of the stitch is in the front, and that makes it so it slants to the right also, because it's a make one right. And then we're going to purl into the, just simply purl into the front of that. And you can see that that twists it. Okay, let me show you that again. Let me take that out and I'll show you that one more time. You can take your right hand needle and lift this bar, this strand between the stitches, and put it up on the left hand needle so that the left leg is in the front. Then we're just going to purl into the front of that. And when we do that, it's going to twist it and close any gaps. Okay. Rewind that if you need to. And then I'm going to purl all the way across. When we get just before the last 2 stitches, I'll show you how we'll do a make one left purl. All right, I've come to the last 2 stitches and I want to make one left purl. You'll notice mine's a little loose because this is where I chose to change colors. It may or may not be that way for you, but I'm just going to hang on to these tails just to make sure I don't have anything too elongated while I'm trying to negotiate this other technique. So when we make one purl left, make one left purl, I'm going to take the right hand needle and lift the bar again, the strand between the needles. I'm going to lift it up onto the left hand needle with the right leg being in front. So that creates the slanting to the left. Okay, then I'm going to knit in, then I'm going to purl into the back of that stitch, which is going to feel a little awkward, but you're going to go behind here and you're going to catch that back leg. Okay, so if you need to move that a little bit, you can, and go back there like that and catch that back leg. Okay, I'll show you that again. I just kind of maneuver things around like that and catch the back leg of the stitch to twist it and purl into it. Now, if that feels weird, the other way you can go about it is to kind of do that rolling, you know, take your needle tips around each other, pinch that on with your thumb and create some slack. So then you can grab that and knit into the back of it. So if you're a little bit tight knitter, you can purl into the back that way. Okay, I'll show you, I'll take that out and show you that one more time. So I'm holding on to the tails here because mine's a little loose from where I changed the color. So all I'm going to do is lift this bar up with either needle tip so that the right hand leg is in the front. Then I'm going to purl into the back of the stitch, and that's what twists it so I don't have a big old hole. Okay, and I seem to have split that stitch just slightly, so I will do that again since I split it. Okay, then I'm just going to finish by purling the last 2 stitches and carry on. And I'll go ahead and, you know, give that a little tug and tighten that up. All right, now the other thing I want to show you is carrying the colors up. My striping sequence is going to be a little different. It's going to change throughout the sweater, and you'll see why later on. But what I'm going to do now is hang on to this tail in the back, the dark one, and I'm going to loosely get a hold of the light blue. That's what I'm going to knit with next, and I'm just going to loosely bring that up and begin knitting with it for my next row. And it's important to keep this fairly loose. You don't want it dangling, but you want to have it relatively loose so that when the yarn blooms, if it does bloom and it changes at all, it's not going to pucker or become tight. So that's not going to be the case for me. This whole thing is going to be pretty loose on the edges until I do my duplicate stitch and weave in my ends. So it's not sloppy, but it is loose. Okay, I'm on page 4, and now I'm going to repeat those last 2 rows 3 more times. Now, if you're doing the 6-row repeat, your last color, the last 6 rows will be in color A if you're doing that. I am not. But I did on the first sweater. So just take note of those little notes in parentheses because the designer has done a really good job of keeping you on track here. Just pay attention and don't skip anything. I have done the repeats that are necessary, and I verified the stitch counts for my size on the chart on page 4. The 3rd chart after you get done with the color changes, and it says in parentheses there, it says the last 6 rows will be color A. That is not the case for me because, like I mentioned earlier, I'm doing a different kind of stripe sequence. But if you are, if you're following the 6-row stripe, so then you'll know where to end up. And then you'll want to double check your stitch counts with that chart in the middle of the page for your size. For front stitches, which is this first section, then your sleeve stitches are here between the markers. Your back stitches are those long stretch across here, and then the other sleeve and the front. Okay, now we're at the part where we're going to do the backward loop cast on onto the left-hand needle for the prescribed number for your size. So the backward loop is super easy. I just take the yarn over my finger like this, and I fold it over my finger. So I grab the yarn and I put my index finger under it and go around like this. So the strand is going over my finger and coming off the bottom. Then I simply turn my hand like this and shove the needle up in there. So that way I'm doing a half hitch basically, and that's the backward loop cast on. So I'm going to cast on the number that it says in the chart. So again, I grab the strand over my finger. So this is on the top, this is on the bottom. Turn your hand over and put the needle up through. Okay, so it should look like a half hitch where the yarn comes out under the loop. So you're going to do that however many times indicated for your size. Whoops, without splitting a stitch like I just did. Okay, let me double check what I need to have here. Okay, fantastic. This is where I'm going to leave you for this week. I look forward to seeing your projects in progress. Okay, fantastic. We've gotten through the first section of the neck and the shaping. You're going to see how we're going to join in the round next time and how that's going to all come together, and it'll all make perfect sense. So I hope you're enjoying these tutorials. Again, comment in the groups if you have any questions. And I look forward to seeing your works in progress on Wednesdays in the Facebook group, and post whenever you want to show your work in progress on the Ravelry thread. Okay, can't wait to see them.